ethics experts are raising concerns after President Trump bought as much as $5 million in shares of taser maker Axon Enterprise just 2 weeks before Immigration and Customs Enforcement sought a 5-year contract for tasers. Federal disclosures filed in May show Trump purchased between $1 million and $5 million worth of Axon stock on February 10th. And then on February 24th, ICE posted a notice seeking nearly 18,000 new tasers with specifications that appear to, surprise, surprise, only match Axon products. While no contract has yet been awarded and there's no evidence that Trump was involved in or had knowledge of the procurement process, this is just the latest example of a possible conflict of interest the president has found himself in while in office. I want to bring in Democratic Congresswoman Andrea Salinas of Oregon. She's introducing new legislation that would prevent a sitting president from profiting off insider trading. And look, there's several of these kinds of pushes happening, right? There's the no stock trading in Congress piece that there's questions about if it should include the president and vice president. That's bipartisan. This legislation, of course, introduced by you. Democrats would have to take control of the building for it to have real teeth. But it's notable that you're introducing this legislation as candidates across the country, Tallarico, Ossoff, I'm sure you yourself are pushing a message of anti-corruption here in Washington.
100%. I mean, as you just mentioned, this president is profiting off of his own investments. And whether it's the Warner Brothers, Paramount merger or Palantir, who's also up for tons of contracts, this president has already made about $1.5 billion by insider trading and these what are very specious ideas for investments that the federal government is involved in. So even the mere fact that it looks bad and it looks illegal should be reason to plug this hole. And so, yes, this bill would essentially just tax them at 100% of capital gains.
Yeah. And effectively make it that you cannot make a profit, hence no
That's
profit
right.
act.
Exactly. No profit act. Yes.
Off of
but if he puts it in a blind trust, like most members of Congress do with their stocks, I don't own stocks, but if you have stocks, that's what most people do is you put it in a blind trust. You have no idea what's in there. Somebody else takes care of it. This would essentially say, do that and you're good. But if you don't, you're getting taxed at 100%.
And I think it's interesting and instructive as we go into the midterms what Democrats might do if they were able to notch their majority. And so I think the legislation is interesting from that perspective. I do also want to get you on some Congress news of day because you were on a call just yesterday afternoon with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff talking about the Iran memorandum. And I wonder what you made of that call and if you got any tangible information from it.
Well, I mean, I seriously think it was just an attempt to cover their bases, given Congress has already, the Senate and the House, passed war powers resolutions to say, we need to tell you whether or not you go into Iran or you help out with Lebanon or all these things. So I think that was part of it. Rubio admitted this was just the MOU is a negotiation to negotiate an actual settlement and an agreement. So it's kind of a nothing burger. And then at the end, they admitted that they allowed 60 days of Iran to sell oil, and that those oil revenues and profits are going to the terrorist regimes in Iran. So this is a debacle of their own making. Democratic members basically said it out loud. They repeated it. And so nothing new here.
But my understanding, too, is that Republicans pressed them on that call as well.
They did press them, and they danced a little bit more and I think tried to be a bit more delicate. Democrats were pretty bold and just, what are you doing here and who's making a profit and what's happening and how are the Americans being hurt by all of this? But yes, you are correct. There were some Republicans who were not happy with what's going on.
And I think it speaks to the angst about the lack of briefings, but then also what is in this memorandum of understanding. So we'll keep tracking that, especially as there's a push for a public briefing now. But then I also want to get you on the vote by mail ruling out of the Supreme Court, because you're in a universal mail voting state, and I imagine there were a lot of people waiting with bated breath for this ruling.
100%. Oregon has been voting by mail for over 30 years, and that is the only way we vote. We do not have polling, poll places. But we passed in 2021 a bill that would allow anybody who votes by Election Day, so postage stamp day by Election Day, an additional 7-day grace period afterwards.
Yeah.
Because at that time, we saw under President Trump's first term, postal services and post offices closing. So it was taking longer and people didn't know what was happening with their ballots. And we can track our ballots. We can, online. So this will, so the the ruling from the courts was a huge win for Oregon, for my constituents. Everybody who is able to vote should be able to vote, and that vote should be counted. And this is what this will do.
And then, of course, we're monitoring what the Postmaster General is saying about will they send ballots to everybody if a state hasn't given over their voter rolls. I mean, the Supreme Court ruling is important, and yet there are other threads of this that we will have to follow that could impact states like yours.
100%.
Democratic Congresswoman Andrea Salinas of Oregon, thank you for coming on, taking us around the map on a whole bunch of topics.